guys, this episode of Paradigm Profiles is called Salinas Valley War Zone. So those of you who have been to a level 4 mainline know what it's like to be out there on one of these yards. There's something about being out there that grabs your attention, something that you can feel permeating in the air, something that tells you you're in a diabolical place. Some people have said that this is a mixture of all the animosity and hostility that bleeds out of all those who are doing life on those yards and all those who know that they will never leave or see freedom again. Others have said that this feeling of calamity and immorality are the unrested souls of all those who have died and lost their lives in this forbidden environment. The souls of all those who have been stabbed, shot, and callously rubbed out of this life as they knew it. Mostly all level 4 yards get under your skin the same way. As soon as you step out on that yard, you feel something that ain't right. Something diabolical that instantly tells you that this is an unsafe place. Salinas Valley definitely comes to mind when considering some of the more violent level 4 prisons out there. Over the last 10 to 15 years, Salinas Valley has had its share of stabbings, shootings, killings, riots, and mayhem. This can't be refuted. How many times have you seen mainstream media put articles out about another inmate killed in Salinas Valley? Or 2 inmates stab another inmate to death? This profile will highlight some of the recent killings that have taken place in Salinas Valley and the history of Salinas Valley since it was opened back in 1996. I remember the first time hearing about Salinas Valley being built because it was in close proximity to Soledad State Prison, another prison that had a lot of NF historical value about it. In fact, construction crews broke ground for Salinas Valley right around the same time they did for High Desert. So in 1996, Salinas Valley officially opened up for business and housed a total of 2,867 inmates, the institution's full design capacity. As of April 30, 2020, Salinas Valley was incarcerating people at 117.3% of its design capacity, with 2,877 occupants. Like all other California state prisons, Salinas Valley has always been extremely overcrowded and had to devise its own housing strategies to accommodate all the extra bodies. The gyms on the yards were converted into makeshift dorms, huge overflow areas where inmates were packed in like sardines and triple stacked on bunk beds. This kind of overcrowding that became commonplace for all California prisons increased tension, created hostile environments, and allowed an abundance of misclassified inmates to congregate on lower and higher level yards. Sometimes inmates can get classification overrides by the institution's classification committees, meaning they can be allowed to remain on a lower or a high level yard based on certain criteria that the institution may deem them eligible. But with so many extra inmates to contend with, the classification committee has become nothing more than a turnstile, serving no other purpose than to herd the inmates through the aimless process. For the community of Monterey County, however, the expansion and building of Salinas Valley became a godsend. Over half the adults in that community were employed at the prison, and the prison in essence became the source of much needed jobs. However, it didn't take long for Salinas Valley to begin experiencing its share of trouble. In 2015, 20 years after the prison opened, the State Office of the Inspector General began and completed a 6-month investigation into conditions of the prison after complaints of officer misconduct and prisoner abuse. The investigation and the subsequent oversight called for changes at the facility. Although there are buildings to house certain inmates in protective custody, such as sex offenders, officers put other inmates near them. The prison has had rapid turnover in top management for nearly a decade, with 7 wardens in 8 years. In their reports, investigators wrote there is a perception of insularity and indifference to inmates at Salinas Valley, exasperated by its remoteness, and a labor organization that opposes oversight to the point of actively discouraging members from coming forward with information that could adversely affect other officers. This is reminiscent of the Green Wall all over again, and Salinas Valley is no stranger to the Green Wall, as this is where the Green Wall was born. Ever since this insidious underground fraternity was created, It has fostered a culture that discourages officers from coming forward and reporting misconduct when they see it. In these situations, officers who do break the code of silence are ostracized and are targeted by other officers who are on board with this fraternity. This not only had a trickle-down effect, but it also had a trickle-up effect, where ranking officers are also encouraged to partake in this ominous and sinister misconduct. You're either part of the solution or you become part of the problem. And here's something else to keep in mind. Whenever you have an unscrupulous and corrupt administration that establishes itself within a prison environment, this also spreads and permeates amongst the inmates. It spreads like a rampant cancer. This is what has taken place in Salinas Valley. This prison has become infected with the ills of an untrustworthy administration, and this in some ways set the tone for the inmates. It's become another Corcoran or Old Folsom, and this is because the institution has created a hostile gladiator type of environment. It's not a secret that Salinas Valley has become one of the most violent level 4 prisons within the state of California. Over the last 10 to 15 years, the numbers of inmate casualties have quadrupled since the prison first opened. Several things have factored into this. In 2015, a landmark settlement was reached by a federal judge which officially ended long-term solitary confinement in the state of California. The days of indeterminate shoe programs for validated gang members had officially come to an end. This was a landmark victory for the throngs of gang members who had been stranded in the shoes for what was sometimes decades. But on the other hand, the release of all these high-level leaders was an unforeseeable and an unanticipated circumstance that CDCR wasn't prepared to contend with. The main lines were already teeming with thousands of youngsters who come from a new unfettered generation of undisciplined and unrestrained youngsters. But now you release a torrent of leaders, high caliber inmates from all the different group segments, and it transforms into a big, convoluted melting pot of violence, tenacity, malfeasance, and leadership. But CDCR still had one more seditious form of ingredient that they would later add to the fray. Death row inmates straight from the confines of California's death row. In November of 2016, California voters passed Proposition 66. As part of that ballot measure, the penal code was amended and now requires condemned inmates to work consistent with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR rules and regulations, so that they can pay restitution to their victims. This was a partial win for victim rights activists and all those who were a victim of their crimes. But in order for these death row inmates to begin paying these sometimes huge restitution fines, this required them to be transferred out to other California prisons so that they could work and earn wages. This meant that death row inmates would be thrown into the huge convoluted melting pot of CDCR trouble. Anybody wondering why there's been such a huge spike in prison-related murders that have taken place over the course of these last 15 years is obviously someone who hasn't been paying attention to all the laws and changes that have taken place within California and the prison system. So in comparison to some of the other prisons I've been to, Salinas Valley State Prison is a pretty big prison. It consists of 5 facilities, A, B, C, D, and M. Of the 5 facilities, A and D and M house sensitive need yards, S and Y inmates. The surrounding housing units hold level 4 and level 3 inmates. The 2 highest security rankings. M yard is a level 1 yard which houses approximately 200 inmates. The prison had a gymnasium like all other prisons, but due to statewide the overcrowding, it was converted into a dormitory. However, due to inmate population reductions, it was shut down sometime around 2008. The prison also houses an inpatient mental health program formerly operated under the auspices of the California Department of State Hospitals, Salinas Valley Psychiatric Inpatient Program, to accommodate the psychological needs of inmates. Needless to say, there's a lot of JCATs that are housed in Salinas Valley. As of July 31st, 2022, Salinas Valley State Prison was incarcerating people at 102.5% of its design capacity, with 2,941 occupants. Like all other California state prisons, Salinas Valley has always been extremely overcrowded and had to devise its own housing strategy to accommodate all the extra bodies. I covered a similar profile about High Desert that highlighted some of the killings that have taken place over the last 15 years. But here's a look at Salinas Valley State Prisons that's as equally troubling. Keep in mind that these are just a small fraction of the homicides that have been documented to date. On September 15, 2012, an inmate by the name of Edgar Sultan was stabbed to death by inmates Gregory Honchell and Barry Story. This particular stabbing actually set off a riot that involved 30 other inmates. Medical staff were summoned, but by the time they responded, Sultan had succumbed to his injuries. 2 years later, in December of 2014, one of the inmates who participated in the killing, Barry Story, was stabbed and killed himself by 4 inmates. According to prison-generated reports, officers witnessed inmates James Perkin, Todd Morgan, Jeffrey Brugman, and William McIntosh stabbed Story to death on one of the prison's maximum security yards. The motive for the stabbings was believed to be gang-related, as all the inmates involved were believed to have been members and associates of the skinheads. Perkin was serving 25 to life from Monterey County. Morgan was serving 25 years to life out of Santa Clara County. Brugman was serving 18 years out of Sacramento County. McIntosh was serving 25 years to life out of Tulare County. Live by the knife, die by the knife. On October 4, 2013, an inmate by the name of Demetrius Kalitzakis was found in his cell lying face up in a pool of blood. Responding officers found blood splattered all over the walls, floor, and ceiling of the cell. Medical staff responded and found that he had suffered 6 deep stab wounds. His face was crushed and he had been strangled with the ligature. Life-saving measures were administered. However, Kalitzakis' injuries were fatal and he was pronounced dead shortly after finding him. His cellmate Brandon Keene was charged with his murder and was later sentenced to 141 years under the 3 strikes law. On October 26, 2014, an inmate by the name of Luis Valadez was found lying in his bunk after he had been stabbed several times in the face, neck, and head. Responding officers found Valadez bleeding profusely. Medical staff also responded and attempted to perform life-saving measures, but Valadez succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead shortly after. Valadez's cellmate, Horacio Gonzalez, was identified as being the suspect. Gonzalez was serving a life sentence out of LA County for attempted murder. Valadez was serving a 30-month sentence for carrying a concealed weapon out of LA County. On June 6, 2016, 2 inmates attacked another inmate with prisoner-made weapons and disregarded orders from correctional officers to stop the attack. Officers attempted to intervene with chemical agents and fired 1 warning shot from a Mini 14 rifle to help stop the attack. Inmate Isaiah Williams died from his injuries at a local hospital around 12:18 p.m. Williams was convicted out of Fresno County in December of 1996 and was serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. 2 inmates, Andrew Berry and Rex Dickey, were identified as suspects in the attack. Berry had been serving a life without parole sentence out of LA County for first-degree murder, and Dickey was convicted out of LA County in December 1982 for a 2-year sentence for second-degree burglary. Dickey was later sentenced to life with parole in 2003 for second-degree murder occurring in a prison. This conviction stemmed from a case where he was suspected of killing one of his past cellmates. On October 29, 2016, an inmate by the name of Zachary Scott was stabbed and killed by inmate Brant Daniel. The killing was said to be gang motivated. According to gang investigators, they believe that the stabbing was effectuated for the purpose of elevating Daniels' interest in becoming a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. Daniels stabbed Scott 17 times with an 8-inch prison-made weapon. Scott was stabbed in the arms, back, torso, and head, once so hard that the weapon went through Scott's back and pierced his chest. This stabbing was later the basis for an Aryan Brotherhood indictment involving Leonard Dunning, Jason Corbett, and Kevin McNamara. On January 13, 2018, an inmate by the name of Gregory Argueta died after being stabbed in the head, neck, and chest. Argueta was attacked in his cell and assaulted by what is believed to be his cellmate, Jacob Castro. Argueta had been in the system since August 22, 2012, after having been convicted out of Santa Cruz County for second-degree robbery with use of a firearm. Castro had been in the system since September 27, 2013 from Alameda County to serve 25 years to life with the possibility of parole for first-degree murder. In January 2015, he was also convicted of assault with a deadly weapon on an inmate and sentenced to an additional 8 years. On January 15, 2018, an inmate by the name of Jose Alcantar Ortega died after being stabbed in his head, neck, and chest 3 days later. Inmates Alberto Cortez and Jaime Romero were identified as suspects shortly after. Cortez had been in prison since 2014 to serve 35 years to life with the possibility of parole for killing a 19-year-old in Monterey County. On May 7, 2011, Cortez shot and killed Jose Calderon Cisneros at Haight and Salinas streets in Castroville. On April 10, 2018, a fight broke out between two inmates on one of the institution's recreational yards. Correctional officers responded to the attack and attempted to use pepper spray, but an inmate by the name of Jason Lewis died from his injuries. An inmate by the name of Michael Ellison, who Lewis was fighting with, is the suspect. According to prison-generated reports, Ellison used a prisoner-made stabbing weapon to stab Lewis. Medical staff attempted to perform life-saving measures, but Lewis ended up succumbing to his injuries. Lewis was serving a life sentence after having been convicted of first-degree murder out of San Diego County. Ellison has been serving a life with the possibility of parole sentence out of Riverside County since 2004. On June 1, 2020, officers responded to a disturbance in a general population housing unit, B facility, and found inmate Alizer Black, who had apparently collapsed on the floor and was bleeding from his chest. Responding officers said there were 4 suspects nearby and that one of them had an inmate manufactured weapon. When the inmate was asked to give up the weapon, the officers claimed he ignored their orders. Officers then used chemicals to stop the attack and get the weapon. They found another inmate manufactured weapon in that area too. Black had been stabbed multiple times in his chest. Staff tried to save him but summoned an outside ambulance, but despite performing life-saving measures, he was pronounced dead at 1:09 p.m. Black was convicted out of San Joaquin County to serve a 26-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter. The 4 inmates in the case are Lamar Shaw, Ronald Armstrong, Kevin Moore, and Ashbury Rankins. But the case is still under investigation. Shaw was convicted out of Alameda County in May of 2016 to serve a life sentence with the possibility of parole for first-degree murder with a 25-year enhancement for using a gun to cause great bodily injury or death. Armstrong was convicted in August of 2012 out of Contra Costa County. He is serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole for attempted first-degree murder and carjacking. Moore was convicted in March of 2011 out of Solano County. He is serving a life sentence with the possibility of parole for first-degree murder and a 25-year enhancement for using a gun to cause great bodily injury or death. Rankins was convicted in October of 2006 from Alameda County. He is serving a 17-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter and an enhancement for using a gun. He got another 6 years in June of 2012 from Kings County for having a controlled substance in a jail or prison. On November 7, 2020, an inmate by the name of Isaac McCann was found unresponsive in his cell. McCann had apparently suffered multiple stab wounds to his face, head, chest, and back. Medical staff attempted to perform life-saving measures, but McCann succumbed to his injuries. McCann's cellmate, Juan Hernandez, was identified as the suspect in the killing. Hernandez was convicted out of Fresno County on November 19, 2013 to serve life without parole for first-degree murder and a street gang act and commission of a violent felony. He was also given a 25-year enhancement for intentional discharge of a firearm. McCann was convicted out of Contra Costa County on November 14, 2013 to serve life with the possibility of parole for first-degree murder with a 35-year offense enhancement for a street gang act and commission of a violent felony. On August 3rd, 2022 at approximately 8:04 a.m., officers responded to an inmate assault when Angel Montez allegedly attacked Peter Hernandez in a housing unit day room with a weapon. Responding staff used chemical agents to stop the attack. An ambulance was summoned while staff performed life-saving measures on Hernandez. However, Hernandez was pronounced dead at 8:22 a.m. On May 3rd, 2022, an inmate by the name of Edgar Delgado died after he was attacked by another inmate with a manufactured weapon in one of the prison's maximum security yards. Delgado was attacked just after 6 p.m. and responding COs had to use chemical agents to stop the assault. He was then transported to the prison's infirmary but subsequently died around 7 p.m. Delgado had been at the prison since April of 2008 after having been convicted out of LA County on 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder of a first responder and other weapons-related charges. According to prison-generated reports, another unidentified inmate was snatched up and charged with the murder. These ain't even a fraction of the killings that have taken place at Salinas Valley State Prison. These are just the ones I'm highlighting. This prison is ripe for drama, and it's a place where many more prison-style murders are definitely going to happen. I've never done time there. I've only passed through there on high-control parole layovers where I stayed for a week or two. But even during these short layovers, I could feel that same kind of eerie, unsettling feeling in the air that I had felt at other level 4 prisons. Salinas Valley has only been open for 27 years, and in that time, it's been the subject of some controversial incidents. It's going to be interesting to see how Salinas Valley and other level 4 prisons continue to operate over the next 10 to 15 years. CDCR is finally returning back to what some would call somewhat of a normal program after the COVID dilemma, so we'll see what happens. As the merging of the non-designated yards continue to roll out under what's being referred to as a pilot program, it's going to be interesting to see if they ever begin implementing it on the level 3 and 4 yards. The prison killings and the prison-style slayings have already spiked and have reached exponential proportions, but I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet, especially if they begin merging the higher level yards. I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. I'm already working on another profile, so hopefully you guys like these shorter ones. And remember, if you guys have questions for the next Q&A, put them in the community section or in the short that's promos Q&A 29. With that said, we just want to extend our appreciation and gratitude to all those of you who continue to show your support, and all those of you who are new to the channel. We appreciate all of you, our viewers, for without you, we would cease to exist.